I'm the kind of person that sets a goal, achieves it, and then I look for the next bigger goal. And in real estate, even in business, the more you know what you can do, what the possibilities are, right? So before I started, I had low expectations and I had low goals. Now my goals are much bigger.
Because the management and transparency is what's very important. So once you submit a referral, you're going to have your own Home Advantage account, and it's going to tell you where everything sits. So if you have 10 referrals that you've sent into the network, it's going to give you all 10 referrals. It's going to tell you every milestone that client is sitting in, whether they're touring homes, whether they're in escrow. And you now can manage through the Home Advantage application as far as what your pipeline looks like for the referrals that you've sent. And so it's pretty sophisticated, and it's all click of a button, guys.
Welcome to Going from 6 Figures to 7 Figures with Mike Simmons. Mike, I'm always a proponent of one that I like to let people speak for themselves, because it just, how I view you, what we read about you is always, maybe different than what you think you want people to know. So why don't you tell everybody about you and all that good stuff?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. First of all, yeah. So my story is not unique. I don't have some fantastical story where I'm a refugee from another country that paddled here on a boat and had to endure a lot of hardships. I grew up in middle America, right? I'm in Michigan, and my family worked for the automotive industry. I'm in Michigan. It's kind of a prerequisite for living here, and kind of lived in a middle to, lower middle class. And really, the reason I say that is because A, a lot of people fall into that category, but B, my parents' plan for me was to graduate high school, maybe go to college, maybe not. They weren't necessarily pushing me in that direction. And ultimately, my dad wanted me to get a job in a union company. And so you have that union protection and guarantee, right? Which doesn't necessarily exist. But that was the path. Get a job, work 30 to 40 years, work all the overtime you can, and grind it out until you're 65 or 70, and then just live out the rest of your life on what you're able to scrape together. And that was really kind of the path I went down. I graduated high school. I promptly quit college after about a semester and a half. I just was skipping every class and failing grades. So I figured, why am I here? And fell into a union job. I worked for UPS, right? Very stable company, been around for a long time. And my family was ecstatic. And I, unfortunately, at a very young age, in my early 20s, working for UPS, I hurt my back really significantly and had to leave that company because I just couldn't physically lift or lift packages and kind of do the work that I was doing. And I wound up in the automotive industry, right? Again, a win for my family. Hey, this is great. He's in the automotive industry. But I didn't really want to be there, right? I was just sort of doing what I thought I was supposed to do, which a lot of us do, just sort of follow that path that our family puts us on. And I ended up in the automotive industry for about 20 years, was able to progress and get promoted and make decent money, not phenomenal money, but okay money, enough money to make it hard to leave because you start buying toys and houses and, you have bills. And I found myself there grinding it out in the automotive industry. But what I started to realize was two things. The positions in the automotive world that I was striving toward, right? Program managers and directors and VPs, all of these people, I would watch them and they weren't happy. I thought if I got to that position, I would be happy because I'd be making a lot of money and it would be great. But they were miserable. They routinely talked about how much they disliked their wife, their husband, tried to get away from their kids. They hated work, but they were a slave to it, And I was like, this is my future I'm looking at right now. And so I started running the numbers on what do I make? What's the cost of living increase I can expect over the next 20 or 30 years? What are the raises I can expect over the next 20, 30 years? And I realized there was no way for me to retire before I was 70 at the rate I was going. And it really kind of hit me all at once in my early 30s. And so I started looking for a way out of that. What can I do to escape this inevitable life that I've created for myself? And I started looking into things like stocks and stock market, and it was just boring. I hated all of that. I just couldn't stay interested. But eventually, when you Google investing for retirement, investment vehicles, how do I invest to make a lot of money, those kind of search terms, you hit real estate. And I did. And real estate really hooked me. I was really like drawn to the possibilities and reading success stories of people who didn't seem any smarter than me, who were really, knocking it out of the park in real estate. And so I started going down that road. And to be honest with you, it's a very long story, but I won't go into exactly. But in 2003, 2003, I made the decision I wanted to be a real estate investor. I wanted to go down that real estate path. I didn't start my business. I didn't get my first house until 2008. So I spent 5 years spinning my wheels, procrastinating, kind of paralysis analysis, all those things that people do. And it wasn't until I hit like emotional rock bottom. I was working, like I said, in the automotive industry. I was responsible for a small team of prototype builders. We built seats at the time. And we had been working late every single night. We had been there till at least 8 o'clock or later, Monday through Friday. It was Friday. And the customer was in the building. My boss was in the building. And there was a lot of stress around this program that was running late. And we were trying to get it back on track. And the whole team was exhausted. They hadn't seen their kids, hadn't seen their wives. And the client walked up to me and said, "Hey, what's going on with this build? Like, what's wrong with the program? Why are we so far behind?" And I gave him an honest answer, right? Which is just my nature. I don't play games. I don't sugarcoat. I don't play word games. I just say things the way I think that they are. And I told him what was wrong. I said, there's two problems. Your design was an issue. It was unmanufacturable. And we had some problems on our side with suppliers. And so there's some shared blame here, but this is exactly what is causing us to be behind. And I remember, like it was yesterday, he got right up in my face. He actually took a step forward after I said it, nose to nose, and said, "You are a liar." He didn't just say liar. He threw some colorful language in there, but he basically said, "You're a liar." And I was like, wow, it was like a punch in the gut. I didn't expect that, certainly from an adult in the professional world, right? And so I took a step back and went and saw my boss and said, "Listen, Keith, first of all, the client's being a little ridiculous, but secondly, these guys are exhausted. Like, we've been here all week late. Nobody's seeing their family. We're working 14-hour days. Like, we're not getting anything accomplished tonight that hasn't been accomplished yet. This is really kind of out of control. I think we need to go home. I think we need to send people home. This is just kind of turning sour." And what he said next was the turning point that made me actually hit the actual rock bottom of my, psychologically. He goes, "Mike, you need to get your priorities straight." And I said, wow. And I said, "You know what? You're right." And he thought I was agreeing with him, that I needed to put work first and I needed to realize that was more important than anything. But what I really was acknowledging is he was right. I needed to put my priorities in order. My wife, my kid, my health, my family, that's my priority. And so I said at that point, I am going to get out of this and I'm going to use real estate to do it. Now, at that point, I had been flipping houses on my own for about 4 years, kind of poorly and making making up as I go along, no plan, no strategy. And I said, from that moment, I said, this is my escape plan. And I started planning that.
So going back, and I appreciate you being so detailed with your story, because I think that a lot of people, can relate to this. For me personally, it's like a pet peeve when I see people say, well, if you're committed to real estate, you just got to burn the boats. And sometimes that's not feasible for people, right? And
right.
As for you said, that it took you a while to actually get to that point, right?
Yep.
If we go back and when you were doing the numbers and looking at the raises, now, compare, taking that information and how you felt then versus to how you are now, did you even understand like the possibility that was there? Like, your 3% raise versus one transaction would, probably, quadruple that or whatever that means. Like, did you know the comparison at that point?
No, because when I was running those numbers, I was like most people, my mindset was, how much money do I need to just survive the rest of my life? You know what I mean? I was like, I wasn't thinking big. I didn't know what real estate would be able to do for me. This was right at the beginning when I was starting to understand that I needed to try to do something. And no, I was looking at it from like, okay, right now I bring home, $4,500 a month. Like, what do I do so I can bring home at least 3,000 so I can, make my house payment and have enough and like be break even. Like I was looking at like, what is the least amount that I would have to earn in order to be able to leave? And I don't advocate thinking that way. I really don't, because you shoot that low and you don't make it for some reason, you're in real trouble. I'm a big fan of shooting a little bit beyond what you need or what you expect. And so, no, I had no idea that, honestly, when I started in real estate, if you'd have told me what is happening right now in my business, I would have blown my mind. Even when I knew the possibilities, it would have blown my mind. I wouldn't have expected me to be where I am. And then maybe 10 years from now, I'll be blown away by where I am. But, I'm the kind of person that sets a goal, achieves it, and then I look for the next bigger goal. And in real estate, even in business, the more you know what you can do, what the possibilities are, right? So before I started, I had low expectations and I had low goals. Now my goals are much bigger.
And that's interesting because for the most part, most people jump into real estate, right? Because they jump in because they see that it's like, I used to joke back in 2005 was that everybody who gets the real estate license swears they hit the lotto, right?
Yeah.
And I think that most people get into it with dreams of that, right? Like, oh, I'm going to have 6-figure months every month or whatever it may be. And that's not the reality for the majority of people in this industry. And you came in with the opposite, where it wasn't necessarily, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it wasn't necessarily, this is my pipe dream to become stupid wealthy. This is my dream to get out of this rut, this stuck that I'm in.
100%. When I look back at my notes and some things that I was working on when I first started, it's sort of funny how low the bar was for me. But remember, I kind of equate the way you grow up, right? Your family environment, whether it's healthy, whether it's unhealthy, whether it's supportive, whether it's not supportive, whatever it is, there's a certain expectation and a certain culture that you're in, right? And I don't mean culture as in like nationality. I just mean like there's a certain way that things go in your family. And it's like this gravitational pull. For me, it was. I had all blue collar around me, blue collar mentality, which is fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But when you try to do something extraordinary, when you're from that world, it's just sort of like this gravitational pull, right? Like look at the firepower a rocket needs to escape our Earth's gravity. I felt like that was the Earth's gravity was my family's gravity, like kind of pulling me back to what they thought I needed to be doing and what I thought I needed to be doing. And to get beyond that took an awful lot of firepower for me. At first, my first goal was just to hit the outer atmosphere, right? Let's just get up there and see what's going on. Now I'm shooting for other galaxies, to use that analogy. I got much bigger goals, but at first it was just, let's just get up into the upper orbit and see what's what. Let's just see if we can survive up there. And that was my original goal, like to survive.
And that, I guess that always circles back to the saying of, you are the average of the 5 people you surround yourself with, right?
Yeah, that's tremendous. It's funny to me as I go along here and I've had more and more success, been exposed to more and more successful people. Success is way less about the tools and the software and the, all this stuff. It's way more about your own expectations, right? The reason when I had those low expectations for myself when I got started in real estate, or at least I shouldn't say low, I had reasonable expectations, right? Very logical, reasonable. That's all I was hitting, and sometimes less, because I wasn't surrounding myself with people who saw the world differently. And it wasn't until I put myself in rooms and around people who had much greater success than me. And so therefore they expected great success because they had already had it, right? It's that flywheel. Like you expect it, you get it, you expect it again. Then I started seeing, oh, wow, my vision of what was possible for me was so incredibly low. There's a whole world out there that expects way more than that, and they get it. And it wasn't until I surrounded myself with that mentality that I was able to achieve those things. If you stay in that little bubble, that little scared kind of like bubble of reasonableness, that's really what you can expect, is sort of what you know, where you set your goals. You're not going to, in other words, nobody aims for the moon and hits Jupiter, right? It just doesn't happen. So when you aim very low and very reasonable, you tend to hit it, or maybe a little less. And that's where you stay for the most part.
Yeah, I think I don't know if you've ever read Bill Walsh's book, I think it's called The Score Will Take Care of Itself. And his whole thing is about, you raise your standards, right? Like that's how you do everything, is you have to raise your personal standards.
Yeah, 100%. You have to. And somebody told me early on, and I didn't really understand, and I didn't take it to heart. I didn't really think about it, but I think about it all the time now. You know, he was asking, like, what do you expect to make in real estate? What is your goal? Like, you know, yearly income. And I told him, and he said, triple it. And I was like, what? Just triple it? What do you mean? He's like, you have to think bigger. Like whatever you think you can achieve or what you want out of life, you need to realize you're thinking too. So almost everyone thinks too small intuitively because they're afraid to think too big. You have to start thinking bigger if you want bigger things to happen. I get reminded of this all the time. I try to think big all the time. Like, I'm always thinking about that. And then I'll be around people or somebody or a friend or somebody who starts talking, and I go, I am playing it too small still. Like, even when I'm conscious of it, I'm playing it too small. So it's a constant thing that I think we all have to sort of push ourselves a little bit farther than we think we can go.
No, I agree. Touching on, you said you were flipping homes by yourself and you didn't really have a plan. Kind of expand on that, because, you know, there's this myth that, you know, home flippers that's how you become wealthy. And
Yeah.
as somebody who's flipped lots of homes, you know, I know the reality behind it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. So what I was doing, I had the mentality, this is fatal flaw. This cost me years. By the way, I'll tell you a quick little anecdote that I think is important here, and then I'll answer your question more specifically. But I went back recently, I think it was like a year and a half ago. I was giving a presentation, and the presentation, part of it centered around the cost of waiting, right? And I went back and did a kind of a financial, forensic financial analysis of those 5 years that I mentioned a minute ago that I sort of was in paralysis analysis. Had I started earlier and actually put myself around the right people, got the right coaching, did all those things that I eventually did to blow up, if I had done those 5 years earlier, what would be the difference? What money would have been made during that time that I delayed? And I did the math. It was $3.1 million of revenue that I left on the table because I waited so long to get started. And that's assuming there would still be a ramp up, right? We're not going to hit the ground running day one, but even with a ramp up. So that's huge. But what I did for those 4 years, to answer your question more directly, when I was flipping houses by myself, I thought that coaching, mentoring, masterminds, all these things, complete waste of money. It's all out there, right? I have this little device on my desk called a computer that's hooked up to this thing called the internet. What information is unavailable to me? It's insane to pay someone for information that is essentially free out there in the ether, right? The problem is, if you don't know where to look, if you don't know who to listen to, right? Because the problem with the information age that we're currently in is everybody will give you information, whether they know what they're talking about or not. And so I was struggling to understand what I was doing that was limiting me. I had this sort of ceiling that I was bumping up against, this glass ceiling, because I was flipping houses and I was completely inefficient. I had no processes. I didn't hire anyone to help me. I had no idea that what I was doing was so wildly unscalable that I couldn't scale it. And I was working a job at the time, a full-time job, doing this on the side. And so I would spend every morning, every lunch hour, and after work every single day looking at houses, making offers, kind of muddling through it. But I was trying to invent a playbook that already existed. And I didn't know how to do it. I didn't know what I was doing wrong. It's hard to self-analyze when you don't know what you don't know, right? How do you analyze what you're doing right or wrong when you've never done it before? It's impossible. It's like teaching yourself to golf without help. Like, I mean, yeah, I suppose you can, but who's looking at your swing? Like, who's kind of telling you how to hit the ball? Nobody was doing that for me. And so I muddled around for about 4 or 5 years, kind of making a few bucks here and there, losing money, making money, kind of breaking even. Like it was just not going anywhere. And it really wasn't until I sought help that things changed for me.
Nice. So when in 2008, when you finally went all in, what were the, obviously, you hinted at coaching, masterminds, and things of that nature, but what were the steps that you took that when did you really feel that acceleration hit? Like, when did you really feel like you had the wind behind you and that you were really moving?
Yeah. So I went all in, joined a mastermind. Now, at the time, I had never been in a mastermind. I had never paid for coaching, but I happened to have made a friend virtually who was flipping houses in California. He was flipping 100 houses a year. I was doing 10 maybe a year. He was doing 100 and he was bored. He had nothing to do all day because he had dialed it in so well and he had a little team built and he was just like doing nothing. So I knew this guy, I had met him virtually, and he had a podcast. And he said on his podcast one day, listen, I'm going to start a mastermind of experienced high-level investors, and it's $25,000 for the year. We're going to meet once a quarter and sort of exchange ideas, talk, network, and we're going to help each other grow. That was the extent of the offer. Like, we're going to meet 3 times a year. But I knew this guy was much, much better than me. And he had figured it out to the point that the reason he did this mastermind and started a podcast is because his wife said, you need to get out of the house and leave me alone. You're just following me around all day because you're bored and you're driving me crazy. And so I was like, if this guy is so bored flipping 100 houses, by the way, in Southern California, right? Very competitive. I said, this is something for me. So I joined the mastermind, and it was a group of people. They weren't that high level. They were I was one of the highest level people in there. And I was doing like a deal, or maybe you deal every other month, a deal once a month, not that much. I was one of the most experienced people, but there was one guy who was also running the mastermind, who is he was a mentor of mine. He still is. And he's a dear friend of mine named Andy. Andy was also doing 100 deals a year in Utah, which is an very competitive market also. But he sat me down, and he was about 4 years before he was about where I was at the time, but he had gone and he was doing a couple $1 million a year in business. And I said, Andy, you were where I am 4 years ago. What did you do over those 4 years? Like, he sat me down and showed me the roadmap. And he said, I did this in 4 years. And I said, but I have all of your hindsight, right? Like, I have all of your lessons learned. Shouldn't I not be able to do it faster than 4 years if I'm not figuring it out as I go like you had to? And he said, yeah, definitely. You should definitely be able to do it sooner. So I went from I was on about a $200,000 run rate at the time. Like, that would have been my revenue for the year for 12 months was about 200,000. After talking to Andy a handful of times, a couple of meetups, within 12 months, actually it was a little less than 12 months, my company profited $1 million within a 12-month period of time because I had clarity now. I tell people all the time, if you can use other people, successful people in whatever industry you're in, if you can use their hindsight, their 2020 hindsight as your foresight, imagine what you can do, right? Imagine if you're trying to walk across a minefield, but somebody gives you a map that pinpoints exactly where the mines are. You just don't step on them. You get through that minefield safely and faster. And that's exactly how I felt. I was able to use his hindsight as my foresight. And so he taught me things like how to hire, when to hire, right? I was completely freaked out by hiring. But what was happening, part of my problem was, I couldn't get any further than I was because I was at my own bandwidth's end. I had no more to give at the end of the day, at the end of the week. And I needed help take the things off my plate that were not the highest and best use of my time. So that was number one. He also taught me about building teams and having that company culture that makes people want to work hard for you, right? Huge thing he taught me. And this is so overlooked because as an entrepreneur, usually, especially in real estate, people who get a little bit of traction, have a little bit of success, they're real good at finding deals. They're real good at closing deals. They're great at talking to sellers. They're great at all those things. What they don't love usually are numbers and spreadsheets and that mundane entering figures into a spreadsheet, analyzing the numbers. Most entrepreneurs shy away from that because it's so, monotonous. We like going out there, making things happen, talking, wheeling, dealing, getting to sellers and buying houses and all that, making deals. And so he taught me the value of KPIs. You have to know your numbers, because if you're going to grow and you're going to allocate funds toward marketing, for example, if you don't know what marketing is working for you and to what extent it's working, what is the multiple? When you spend $1, do you make $2? When you spend $1, do you make $10? If you spend $1, do you lose $1? Like, what's happening there, right? That and other KPIs related to my company, he showed me how to put those in place. So now I had not only a small team around me, but I knew how everything was performing. So I knew what levers to pull. I knew where I could put more energy and time to really multiply what was already working. And I knew that I had to either work on or eliminate some of the things that weren't producing for me. And so I put KPIs in place that made a big difference. And then the marketing side of it too. I just wasn't marketing effectively. I didn't know what to do. I was just throwing money out there and, spaghetti against the wall and trying to see what worked. But there's a strategy and there's a methodology behind marketing that I learned that was huge. And like I said, just the coaching, having someone that I could call or talk to meant everything to me.
And you covered a lot of very important stuff that I kind of want to touch back on.
Sure.
So going back to, you said using somebody else's hindsight for your foresight. I think a lot of the problems that we run into, I know I did early, was that even when you pay for the mastermind, the coaching, the programs, there's that little voice inside of you. You've been an entrepreneur forever, or you think you're a little smarter than you are, that you start to tweak things. So like, did you ever find yourself going like, I just need to follow exactly what they said? Or were you always that way?
Yeah. Here's my superpower, right? Some people are great at sales. Some people are great at marketing. Here's my superpower. I am really good at listening and following directions when I feel like the person giving me the direction is the real deal. So I was raised by a Marine. My dad's a Marine. In my house, we followed directions. When we were given a direction, we didn't question it. We didn't try to tweak it. We didn't improvise. We did what we were asked to do as kids, right? So as an adult, when I met Andy and I knew Andy was legit, I was very comfortable that he actually had the business he claimed to have. And I knew that for a fact. Anything he told me, I did it exactly how he said to do it. And I did it with enthusiasm. Like, I think massive, crazy implementation is one of the keys to success. I don't know anybody who's successful who doesn't implement and take action in a massive way. That is a huge key. So when he told me, hey, this is what I did, this is what I would do if I were you, this is what I'd do first, and this is what I would really emphasize and what I would prioritize, done. Next. Now what? Like, that's how I operate. So, I think if you're not coachable, you're doomed to failure. I don't care who you are, unless you're happy where you are or you're interested in failing in some level, right? Because I do think there's something behind that old phrase, if you're not growing, you're dying. I think if your business isn't growing and evolving, it is dying. You're eventually you're gonna struggle. And so I'm constantly trying to improve. And the only way you can improve is to open yourself up to the possibilities that you should or could do something different. And so coaching and being coachable. And I played sports in high school. Like, I wasn't the greatest athlete, but I played all kinds of sports. From the time I was able to throw a ball, I was on a team, and I did that through my senior year. And so I was very good at being coached. I had a Marine as a dad. Like, just tell me what I need to do and let me go. And then from there, you learn how to make your own way and kind of do things your way. But in the beginning, if you don't know, you've got to have someone that can tell you, and then you got to implement it. There are people out there that I have called. I got this from my friend Justin, whose mastermind I joined, but he said there's people out there, and he called them yeah butters. Anytime they ask you for advice and you give it to them, they say, yeah, but I've tried that. Yeah, but that doesn't work in my market. Yeah, but I live in a bad part of the country. They're yeah butters. No matter what you do to help them, their response is yeah, but. And they don't succeed. They struggle because they're not coachable.
They always have a problem for every solution, right?
Exactly. There's never anything but a problem in their world. And listen, a lot of success, man, like I said, it's not spreadsheets, it's not software, it's not where you live. It's what you do with what you have. I have been coaching people for 7 years, and I have given people, like, to use the housing and building analogy, I have given people the blueprints, the materials and all of the tools to build what they want. And some people take that information and run with it, and they build something even bigger than what I expected from them. I give other people the exact same blueprint, materials, and tools, and all they do is blame the blueprint, the materials, and the tools. It's never going to work because what they were given isn't sufficient. You can't help those people. You just can't. You need someone who will take those tools and run.
Yeah, I mean, you can, like you said, you can give everybody the blueprint and everybody's going to have different results. If we talk about how you touched on KPIs, which is one of my favorite topics, and one of the things that I'm always harping on the people that I'm consulting with is like, how often do you change your KPIs or revisit them to see if they are the ones that you should be tracking, and lead versus lag indicators and all that? Can you touch a little bit on that?
Yeah, it's a great question. We definitely review them yearly. We don't review them quarterly. We review them yearly to see if we need to change them, if they're realistic. Sometimes, especially when you're starting off, your KPIs are a shot in the dark. You don't know because you don't have enough data to know exactly what they should be. So you take your best shot, and then maybe, in the first year, if I was never used KPIs or never even tracked anything, I probably would review them even once a month just to see kind of where I'm at. But at this point, we've been doing it so long, we do it yearly. But we have you said leading and lag. So the way we phrase it in our company, the way that we track things, we track activity KPIs. What are we doing on a daily basis? The activities that we know lead to the results. And then we do have results KPIs. Results KPIs are how many deals did we get last month? What was our revenue? Like how many phone calls did we get? Like these are all things that are in the past. We can't adjust them. But we do know that certain activities, like, for example, in our world, the people who go out and buy properties, we call them acquisition managers, right? Some people just say sales, right? Sales is more of a traditional way. But part of their role in our company is doing outbound prospecting, right? So how many calls are they making? And usually it's to our database for the most part. They're calling leads in our database. How many outbound calls did my acquisition person make today? How many are they making tomorrow? What do we expect them to make this week? And so if the goal is to make 100 calls a week, let's just say, for example, and on Thursday, they've only made 10, right? We're in trouble. Like, we can sort of correct that in real time. How many did you make Monday? None. How many did you make Tuesday? None. Okay. We need to really correct this now so that at the end of the month, we know we're going to hit some of those results that we were looking for. And so in my company, we do a lot of wholesaling too. So we have a dispositions manager, and how many buyers are you bringing into the funnel? Like, how many deals are you sending out? So we can reasonably predict what's going to happen at the end of the month, as long as we're hitting our daily activity KPIs. And so that's the way we look at it. It's activity and results. Those are the two things that we typically focus on.
I like that. I definitely like that. So a couple of things that I wanted to touch on that you mentioned as well. Wholesaling, you're doing the investment side. Some people in real estate, they just no sugar way of doing it. Some people say that they hate wholesalers, right? To me, as a broker and as an investor, I love wholesalers. I mean, they're out there grinding it out and spending their own money, finding people that are raising their hands that they want to sell. They can't close every deal on the wholesale side. Those turn into listing referrals or whatever it may be. What is your best practices for somebody right now who's an agent who, maybe struggling in their business, an agent or a brokerage, and, about dealing or building relationship with wholesalers?
Wow, you really hit on it. A lot of people in the real estate agent / broker world do not like wholesalers. I know a lot of them in my market do not like me. I think they don't like them. They'll say a lot of reasons why they don't like them, but I think one of the reasons, or the major reason, is they're frustrated that sometimes good wholesalers are sort of eating their lunch, right? They're finding deals and locking them up before they get a chance to see them. But a wholesaler can and should be an agent's best friend. They can definitely work together. As an agent, you definitely get properties or people calling you to list properties that are probably not going to sell because they're not in good enough condition. They need way too much work. And so what you just end up losing those listings. But I think even more than an agent kind of becoming friendly with wholesalers, that's number one. That's the low hanging fruit to me. The more effective thing, and if I was a broker or an agent, I would hope that I would be enlightened enough to realize I could do what they're doing. Like, you can go out, an agent will make 3% as a buyer's agent or whatever. If you can't find a seller or a buyer for that house, and you have to lose the listing, and then some wholesaler comes along and gets it under contract and sells it to a house flipper, they're making $10,000, $15,000, $20,000, $30,000 by just getting that thing locked up. Like, you could do that as an agent. There's a path for agents to have a dispositions, we call it in wholesaling, a dispositions part of their business, a strategy where they're taking these properties, they're locking them up on a contract and finding an investor who wants that deal. That's the next step. That's the final evolution of kind of like being open to working with wholesalers and doing that, but then eventually just taking on that dispositions role yourself and making the money. I have taught hundreds of realtors how to do that, and it blows their mind because they start off thinking, I can't do that. I'm a realtor. I've got rules and my broker will never allow it. That's where they start, right? With limited mindset. And then you kind of open up their mind and expand. No, this is definitely possible. And here's how you can do it. And you can make the $20,000 instead of the wholesaler. Like, there is a path for that. You guys are in contact with so many sellers, and you know for a fact you're not going to sell every single house that you put, that you contract to sell for them. That just doesn't always work out, right? Rather than lose that listing, there's another option that you could explore that is very, very lucrative, and it can be done. So not only should they work with wholesalers, if they want to be hands-off and passive, certainly work with wholesalers. But if you really are interested in raising that revenue for yourself, there is a path to learning that dispositions part of it and implementing that into your strategy.
And you can also, what we've done, I mean, we do wholesaling, we've done it forever. You can always, sell it with the, condition of that they got to list it back with you when they're done flipping it. We're ready to flip it.
Totally. 100%.
Everything's negotiable, right? So.
100%. Everything's negotiable. The problem is you have to be willing to open up your mind that there is another way to do things that you're not currently doing or aware of, right? The problem I find, if I can be critical for a minute of the realtor world, you get so indoctrinated into the traditional strategy of a realtor that you close your mind off to other possibilities, other ways that you can go about this. And as long as you're willing to open up your mind and be coachable, like we just talked about, like, just listen to what I want to tell you and make a decision after I explain it, right? Because I've had people go, can't do it. Nope, stop. Illegal. Wholesaling's illegal. I don't even want to talk about it. I'm not allowed to do it because I'm a realtor and I took a oath or whatever you guys do. Like, that's the mindset. And if you don't have that, if you have that mindset, you're okay, you're fine. You're just do what you're doing and that's all you're going to do. But if you can open yourself up like you did, right? You're doing wholesaling. You know the power of that and why you should be doing it and how that really fills a gap in the whole realtor strategy. It's huge, and everyone should be doing that.
What would you say right now, the top, I don't know, 3, 5, whatever number you've got, opportunities in real estate for agents and brokers?
I think it's not even like the top 3 or 5. What I think it is it's like tools in the tool belt, right? If all you have is a hammer, everything has to be a nail. And if it's not a nail, you're out of it. You can't do anything with that, right? I think realtors should be obviously listing houses that are in perfect condition, move-in ready, recently updated. That's great. That's the bread and butter. That's the easy stuff. Everyone can do that. But when you get those houses where they call you out and you go for your seller appointment and you're looking around and you're like, wow, there's a lot of work that needs to be done here to make this thing really sellable. Give them other alternatives. Listen, we can list this thing for whatever, 30 days, 60 days. I'll be honest with you. There's some things that buyers are going to be concerned about. And you just told me, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, you don't have the money for a new roof, even though it's at the end of its life. You don't have money for new windows. They're clearly an issue. You've got a kitchen that was installed in the 80s. Like, it's going to be an issue. Like, we can try to list it, but here's what I think is going to happen. We're going to struggle. We're going to get a lot of low offers. I have another path that we can go down if that is the case, where I buy your house, or, you know, I find someone, however you want to word it, but have that other strategy in your belt. So now you don't just have a hammer, you have a hammer and a screwdriver, you know, you have a hammer and a power saw, whatever it is, whatever analogy you want to use, you have other options for folks instead of losing that listing. And I think it's just a no-brainer to me, but I'm coming from the investor side. I can't imagine why you wouldn't want to do that, because, by the way, the income from that, or the revenue gain from that strategy, it's more than 3% in most cases. You're going to make a lot more than your typical commissions if you go the investor route or the wholesaler route and you find some other way to disposition that property. So I think it's just an absolute no-brainer. But again, I've been doing this since 2008, and I've talked to a lot of realtors and brokers. I am astounded at the number of them who just immediately shut down when you start talking about investing or putting something under contract and wholesaling it. Like, they just shut down. There's absolutely no part of them that's listening to you anymore. And I'm just shocked by it, frankly.
So, you know, wrapping up in these last few minutes, what would you tell an agent or a broker right now? Like, if they came to you and they needed coaching and they were your, like, you know, if I was your mentee or whatever, like, what would you tell me right now in this market if I told you, like, hey, you know, or what would the process be? You know, like, hey, I want to make more money. You know, I'm struggling.
Yeah.
I want to make more money. What would that look like? What would you, you know, giving everybody watching a snapshot of, like, things to think about?
Yep. Well, if they came to me and said, I want to learn what I can do to have more of an investor hat that I can put on, so I can find some way to monetize these deals that don't make sense from a listing standpoint. If they talk to me, I would say, join my program, because I will help you install a dispositions process into your company, where when those properties do come into your pipeline that just don't fit the standard listing MLS model, how do you go about doing that? How do you find buyers? Number one, right? Let's tell you where do you find these buyers? Where do wholesalers find these buyers? It seems like a real complicated, mystical thing. It's really not. It's very easy to find buyers. So I would help them build a buyers list, number one. Number two, I would give them the step-by-step process of how you present or how you expose these properties to the buyers in a way that's going to return the greatest amount of money to you. So it would start by helping them find buyers and then showing them how to evaluate properties like an investor. They have to take off the realtor hat completely, right? Realtors know how to do like a market analysis of a house. I get that. We do it differently in the investing world. And so if you're going to sell to an investor, you have to get in their brain and understand how they look at properties. And so I would teach them how to come up with what we call the ARV, right? The after repair value. And it's not the way you do it as a broker or a realtor. So I would show them that process. So find the buyers, understand how the math they do to figure out what that property's worth, and then show them how to expose that property to them in a systematic way that allows them to get the most money for that property. I mean, it's a process. It's not nothing. It's not completely simple, but it's not brain surgery. And I've been doing this so long that the dispositions process for me, like that part of it where after you get the contract, now how do you find the buyers and how do you maximize that? Frankly, it's my favorite part. And it's a module, right? You can put it onto your business. You can add it as an afterthought to your business and have a whole process built out where you get the most for that property at the end of the day. It's very, very systematic, but it's very specific. People do it wrong all the time, by the way. I know wholesalers that's how they make their money. That's all they do is wholesaling, right? They have a big business. And I've talked to these folks and said, okay, cool. So I know how you get properties. I know how you market. You've got that dialed in. That's great. What do you do for dispositions? What does that look like in your company? And I would say 9 times out of 10, I don't care if they're a huge wholesaling operation or if they're brand new, 9 times out of 10, they're doing it really poorly and they're leaving a lot of money on the table. That's an aspect of real estate, specifically wholesaling, that is so underserved by coaches, by mentors, by masterminds. It is treated like an afterthought. But here's my thought. They say you make money when you buy, right? You've heard that phrase. You make money when you buy. And I believe that. You do make money when you buy. You make half of the money when you buy. You make the other half when you sell, right? And so if we have a property where we should be able to make $20,000 as a wholesaler, 10 of it you make on the purchase side by getting it at the right price and really doing a great job on that end. The other 10, comes on the back end. Because if you get a property at a great price and fail to sell it at the appropriate price, you're losing money. And so that part is very underserved. And that part is great because you can take that dispositions process and plug it into a house flipper's business. You can plug it into a broker's business. You can plug it into a realtor's business. It travels well within all of the different real estate disciplines. And so that's what I would help a realtor or a broker do if they came to me. I would help them create that system and then add it to their business.
Nice. That's a great way to wrap up here. I appreciate your time, Mike. A lot of knowledge, and obviously I know that there's a lot more to it. There's a lot of nuances.
Totally.
How can anybody get a hold of you and all that good stuff as we wrap up here?
Yeah, it's easy. You can go to mikesimmons.com and find out more there. You can contact me through there. I mean, that's kind of the one-stop shop. I do have a podcast that I do called Just Start Real Estate. So if you go to iTunes or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts and type in Just Start Real Estate, you can go there. And I've got about 650 interviews on there. So you're welcome to go and check that out.
All right, man. Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you once again. Thank you for all the great advice, and keep killing it, man.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Had fun.
Thanks.